Hi everyone, and welcome to our next, or our current episode of Mobycon Academy. Tonight we're going to have a digital study tour of Rotterdam and take you on a bit of a ride through some of the streets to experience a bit of the history. So we won't be going through the entire city, or we'd be here for hours on end. But we are going to give you a little bit of a taste. For those that attended the digital study tour we had back in May, it'll be a very similar format where we'll switch back and forth from a presentation to the video and have stops along the way. So yeah, we're going to give you a sense of what Rotterdam is for us. Rotterdam itself is known as a bit more of a car-centered city here in the Netherlands, as opposed to what people would more expect to be more bike-focused, like Amsterdam or Utrecht, with just 25% mode share for bicycles, but we think it's quite a gem, so we're excited to share it with you. For those who haven't met me yet, my name is Melissa Bruntlett, and I'm the International Communications Specialist here at Mobycon, and I live just 10 minutes away by train from Rotterdam here in Delft.
My name is Sophie Simon. I'm a mobility advisor here at Mobycon, and I do actually live in Rotterdam, which for me is the prettiest city in the Netherlands. So I'm really happy to show you around. Don't forget that we will use Mentimeter in our presentation, so you can see the code right now on the screen. We will ask you some questions, but also if you have some questions for us, you can ask them there. And there will be a question and answer part at the end. The study tour will be around 45 minutes. And we hope you enjoy it. So to start, we will start off with our first Menti question. So please go to menti.com, use the code, and we would like to know a little bit who is joining us today. So what is your background? What do you do? Are you an urban planner or a designer or a traffic engineer? Or do you work for an NGO? We are just always interested to know who's joining, since we can't really see people. But it's always good to know who's there.
And it is good to see that Brendan is with us. That was a little fun for you. We'll give people a little bit longer to respond, and you can respond as we go as well. One of the nice things is that we usually have a good cross-section of people that are joining us, which is kind of a bit how it is here at Mobycon as well. Myself being in communications, Sophie as an urban designer, so we know that there's a whole spectrum of people out there who maybe aren't answering the Menti or can't get on, and that is totally fine. We'll give you a chance to keep answering throughout, and you can always come back to the slide as we go. But our next question is just to find out if you've ever visited Rotterdam. So we see, sorry, the screen is a little lower, that's why I'm doing this. But we can see that we have one of each in terms of having been to Rotterdam, someone who hasn't, and someone who in their dreams would like to travel there. And now another person. So hopefully sooner rather than later it won't be in your dreams anymore. We really like Rotterdam, and it'd be really great to have you here and maybe show you around one day. So without further ado, we'll carry on with the presentation. So of course, to understand a bit about what we're riding through, it's always good to understand the history of how Rotterdam has become a very modern city. And so it's important to look a little bit at the historical context as well. Its history is not unique to a lot of cities, but what has happened has really helped to form the urban fabric of the city. And one of the things I want you to keep in mind is remembering the photo you see on the screen here. This is Cool Single. This is an older historic photo. You can tell by the old cars that are being used there. Remember this photo on the street, because it will come up again in our presentation and in the tour later on. So going back to the turn of the century, Rotterdam was a really industrial city. There was a lot of working class activities happening in the city. It was a port city even then. but didn't have as much of the flash as its golden age counterparts in The Hague and in Amsterdam. So it was a little lesser known, a little bit dirtier, a little bit rougher, but still, a pretty bustling city at the time. And at the same time, it also had, like most Dutch cities and most European cities, a central market square with the cathedral, a place for people to gather that was really the heart and the hub of the city. But as some of you might know, unfortunately, Rotterdam suffered some very heavy blows during the Second World War and was devastated with bombing in the center that basically leveled the entire city. With all being left really is the cathedral that you can still see there. But what this did is provided endless opportunities and possibilities for reshaping Rotterdam in the years to come. Really that modernist dream of a blank slate of a European city that they could make the city of the future, which they did.
Yes, so with that blank slate, as you can see or maybe already know, designers, architects, planners began to experiment with lots of different things. But yeah, it was in the 1960s, as everywhere else in the world and in the Netherlands, the car became a mode that was used more and more, and so they saw the opportunity to redesign and rebuild Rotterdam according more for the car. So you have lots of really wide streets, less space for pedestrians and cyclists. So they really took the blank slate that they got and designed it for cars, because that's what was really common in that period. And nowadays, as you can see on the pictures, I think that's what most people know from Rotterdam. You see lots of different type of architecture, lots of skyscrapers. It's a quite modern city, but you can still find some of the really old buildings, and you also have nature. So it's really a good mix of everything. So they are still continually looking to improve, make the city better, and it's changing all the time.
So today's tour, we're going to travel through some of Rotterdam's historic neighborhoods, and we'll give you a taste of actually 3 or 4 sort of different tastes of Rotterdam and what we experienced when we cycled through, and what we hope you get to, that you will experience with us today. So there are 5 stops in total on our route, and it's about 3 kilometers that we're going to travel. The first stop will be at Black Station and Binnenrotte, which is that heart of the city that we presented earlier with the cathedral and where the market and whatnot takes place. And the second stop will be at the Koolsingel and Westblak, which the Koolsingel was what that photo was back at the beginning of the history section. So again, keep that in mind.
Next stop will be the Witte de Witstraat, which is kind of like the party mile of Rotterdam. So we will cycle through that before we pass the Oude and Nieuwe Binnenweg, which we'll talk a little bit about, and then we're going straight ahead towards the central station, which will be our last stop today.
So just a reminder, as we're going through, for asking questions, note the timestamp of the video if you have something specific related to a stop we make or a place we pass along the way. But otherwise, let's get started. Sorry, there we go. So Sophie and I took an afternoon to cycle around and travel through a bunch of different neighborhoods, but we're pretty excited to share what we have to show you here. We can get Hi everyone, welcome back. Just having slight issues, we figured it out. Okay, so we're going to start our ride. And so right now, if we look behind us here, that is the Maas behind us. So this is sort of the edge of the center part of the city. And I think, Sophie, you wanted to talk about a building here.
Yeah, so this white building that you see here used to be the tallest skyscraper of Rotterdam with 43 meters, so way back. But yeah, I think it's funny to see because now, if you scroll to the other side, you see all the skyscrapers that are there now, which are way taller.
That's a quaint little history lesson there. So yeah, we'll just keep cycling along towards our first stop, and you can see there's a bit of construction going on here. It's part of the reason why we've got a bidirectional cycle track on this side and everyone's over here, because the other side of the street is closed at the moment. But generally, because of the way we enter into the area we're going to, that's part of the reason that it exists that way. And of course, we'll come up to one of the many traffic lights we're going to go through along the journey. It's just one of the ways that an auto-centered city can be transformed to be more bike-friendly, means that there's going to be a lot of intersections along the way. But one of the things we wanted to point out here was, I think if we go a little bit further ahead, it might be a bit clearer. Boop. Is the iconic cube houses there that we want you to remember. But I think, Sophie, you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I will also go into this a little bit more in the presentation, but yeah, basically what you can see here on the entire square, that what we said already, have this different type of architecture. So the cubes have been there for a few years, and then you see further down buildings from the 60s, then the Markt Hall is from 2014, and it's really modern, but yeah, it already shows you on this spot that mix that you see everywhere in Rotterdam of different styles and areas. And you also have the Black Station here, which is a multimodal hub. You can take the tram outside here. The metro is also inside. You can go by bike, by foot, and there's also a bus stop right here. Sure if we can see it here.
We'll cycle past it in a minute. Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, so we will officially make our first stop right here. So yeah, as Sophie was saying, this is Black Station, and we've got more to discuss about that right now.
Yes. So here in this picture you can see again the different types of buildings that we have. You see that the taller one is called the pencil building because it looks like a pencil. You can see the cubic houses, the Markt Hall, and this is actually, the picture was taken on a day where the market takes place, so it's a really big market. And then you can also see the little harbor that is still there, and again the building, the white one that I told you, that was the highest skyscraper back then. And again you see the station is really in the heart of the city. You can come from every direction, use every mode, and it's really well connected. But it didn't always used to look like this, because the train tracks were actually on a viaduct, as you can see on the pictures. So that obviously always takes a lot of space from the city, and they put it underground in 1993. So that was when it was deconstructed, and then they gained again a lot of space. That here you can see while they were taking it down, and it really just went past behind the cathedral, where now you have this really big space that you can see there where the market takes place.
Yeah, so by taking away the train station, putting it underground, it opened up all of this real estate that basically retransformed the space back into a heart of the city. It connects through various pathways to a very long pedestrian mall that connects in different sections and takes you to the Lijnbaan later on in the as you're walking along through the mall. And it's just this really great, vibrant place where you see a lot of people coming together, a lot of pedestrian space, but it's safe for cycling to travel through for the most part. So it becomes this really great human scale place for people to get together in a city full of tall buildings that maybe people might think has lost a bit of its human scale, but there's really, a big heart there. And that train really, as Sophie was saying, it takes you to a lot of different places. You can get to Delft very quickly and easily, to The Hague, Leiden, Haarlem, Amsterdam, all without changing trains. So it becomes a really central place, even though we already have or will travel to Central Station. It's a great place to be. And as Sophie mentioned, there's also Bike parking underground, so not only is there bike storage, this is a relatively newer bike storage place, but then you can also get the OV feets here. So even people traveling in from those other cities will have the opportunity to cycle down to the harbor or down to the other side of the Erasmusbrug, where there's some lovely breweries over there if you want to take a trip there one day. But there's just so much vibrant activity, which is a really great way to experience Rotterdam and a great place to people watch as well. And so we will carry on with the tour now. All right, so we're riding along. Thank you for being patient with us. So as you can see behind us, we're leaving the square where there's lots of space for people to gather. And yeah, what's really nice is that you'll see as we're traveling along here, we'll never have to actually travel on very busy streets, like right next to cars, with the exception of right before the station. But yeah, it's a really comfortable place to cycle around here. Oftentimes if you catch every light, it feels like you never have to put your foot down, which is really nice. But one thing I just want to do is pause here to just point out, so lest you think that there's no car access to Market Hall, there very much is. There's underground parking here. And basically, yeah, it becomes the nice entrance sort of out of the way from where all of the hustle and bustle and the excitement is happening at the market. Tucked away, you can access underground parking. And of course, there's those red pavers that most people are used to seeing in the Netherlands that indicates that it's a slower speed and this space is more shared between bikes and cars accessing the space. Yeah, it's just a nice little way of showing how they're prioritizing the more human space of Market Square.
There you can see the tram passing. Also, this street has two bidirectional cycle paths, so on each side of the road, which you might think, okay, why did they do that? I think you actually find that a lot in Rotterdam, which I think is also because, yeah, it has a lot of big wide streets, and as a cyclist you don't always want to pass like 3 different intersections to be on the right side, so they made bidirectional paths, which is really helpful, so you don't always have to cross but can use either side.
Mm-hmm. It certainly makes it convenient, and I know there are a lot of arguments out there as to making it single direction, and it certainly is safer. In the longer, it reduces a lot of those possible conflicts when you're out cycling or between cyclists, drivers, and pedestrians. But it's certainly on a big thoroughfare like this, it's super inconvenient to have to go from one side to the other to get to where you need to go. And there's a lot happening on this street. Not only is there Market Hall that we've already passed, but we're passing by a few museums at this point. So, you know, making sure that people can access those in a comfortable way is really important. And so we're about to come up to our second stop here, and there's actually 2 parts to this stop. So we'll talk about the first one. Once we're in the intersection, I'd like you to have a really good central view here, because this is one of those streets that I told you to pay attention for. This is Cool Single. And so you can see here, it's a very large street where you've got trams mixing with currently two lanes in each direction of cars. There's also cycle tracks, but as you might notice, there's some construction happening around here because this space is actually in the process of being redeveloped, and you can get a little bit of a taste of what that might look like on this side of the road. But yeah, lots to come in this space, and I'm going to scoot back to our presentation and show you a little bit more about the Cool Single and what to expect there. So, as I noted in that historical photo earlier, and as we kind of saw, it was a very wide street, lots of cars coming through here. You can see on the picture on the left, the Bijenkorf, which is the big department store here in the Netherlands. There's lots of them throughout the country. And you can also see that again in the right photo, where you're starting to see that the dynamic change a little bit, get a little more calm, but this is where they're moving to. So much more pedestrianized space, very wide cycle tracks. Those 4 car lanes are being reduced down to 2, so 1 in each direction, and to become a 30 km/h zone. So really a place much more moving at a human pace and allowing people to really enjoy the space. In the visualization on the right there, you can see those that sort of honeycomb design. That's the Bijenkorf again, so that's where a lot of people are coming through a pedestrian mall. Right now there's a lot of activity, well, not right now, but usually there's a lot of activity in that space because it's a big shopping district. So this will be a great change to the space going forward. And we're just going to go back to the video very briefly, and we're going to show you another space just a little bit further up the road. And I'll let Sophie discuss this one.
Yes, so we are still on Westblak, that's what the road is called. It's still this very wide street that we have with the bidirectional cycle paths on either side, and you can see lots of infrastructure again, modern, post-war, some skyscrapers on this side, lots of buildings on this side too, so there's a lot going on. But so this street will also be in the future redesigned, redeveloped. So the city announced this summer that they have 7 big projects that they will invest in over the coming years to make the city even greener and give back more space to people, and this street will be part of it. So as you can see on the pictures here, so the black and white one is what it looks like right now. And then you see what it will look like in the future. So they will also here reduce the car lanes from 4 to 2, so only 1 on each side, and give more space to pedestrians, add more green, so that it really is a space where people can come together, children can play. And it's also to reduce noise and pollution and to better the air quality, which are some of the focus points that the city has and that they want to achieve over the next 3 years. And the Westblak will be like a 2-kilometer long linear park, so that's what they have in mind. And you can see on this rendering what it might look like. You can see at the top the cubic houses where we started our tour, and then all the way to a stop that I will show you later, there will be this park.
All right, and we'll go back to the video and continue our ride. So this space here will be very much transformed in the years to come once that linear park goes in. And it's I think really nice to see that Rotterdam's one of those cities that is really committed to bringing a lot more green space in. They hosted Walk 21 last year, and I know that part of that is this commitment to creating really enjoyable spaces for people to spend time in the city and also bring some of that environment back. So we're about to come up to our next stop, and I think in the next intersection, it's coming up. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss is this idea that, when we see cycle tracks around the world, we so often think they're for bikes, and that's the way the mode should be used. But maybe it's just the next one? No, they're coming. I can see them. We note when these things happen when we're out on the road, but remembering exactly when makes it a bit tricky. But we're, again, waiting at one of the many stoplights in Rotterdam. But as you can see here, we're just passing here 2 people moving along on mobility scooters, which is actually a really common scene on a lot of the cycle tracks and calmed streets in the city. Because it's a really comfortable place for them to travel. They've got enough space to be able to pass people, and it takes that conflict off of the sidewalk. Of course, if it's a really busy cycle track, they would likely stick to the pedestrianized area for their movement around the city, but the fact that this exists for them as a mobility option is just a really nice way of showing that cycle tracks aren't just for bikes. They're for allowing people with varying mobilities to move around. Now we're just going to turn here and head into a little bit of a different landscape from what we've been experiencing. But again, nice protected intersection that we're traveling through, which is it just makes it really comfortable to cycle throughout the city.
So here we are entering into Witte de Witstraat. Wittstraat, and as you can see, it changes a bit. We now have this paved street with the red color that I think many people already know, which is typical for the Netherlands, and it's a 30-kilometer zone, so I think cars and bikes, everyone that enters this type of street knows that they have to slow down and that we share the road now. That is really common in the Netherlands, and I think it's also really intuitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you drive on it, you kind of get the feel what you have to do. And now we are going into the actual Witte de Witstraat, which, as I told you before, is like the nightlife street of Rotterdam. So you have lots of bars, shops, restaurants, and we missed one now, but there will be more coming up. So this summer, during the Corona pandemic, the city decided to give more space to restaurants, to have an outside patio where people could sit and eat and maintain social distance. I think there's one coming up right now. Yes, you can see here that they put up those barricades.
Barricades, yeah.
And then the restaurants were allowed to use this space, and they took it from parking spots, and it worked really well. And unfortunately right now everything's closed again, but yeah.
And just for a little more context, I'm going to switch back to the presentation and show you a couple of slides, just to help you understand. Oh, man. There we go. A little bit more about what the area is kind of like and how it has sort of changed. So as Sophie was mentioning, what they've done in reaction to the pandemic is created these temporary spaces. Some are patios. In this case here, this is bike parking to allow for more space for bikes without crowding onto the sidewalk and allowing people to have space to move through safely. But then also at the same time, they had these temporary measures where they put out pallets for various business owners, not just in this neighborhood, but throughout the city, where they could extend patios, as Sophie mentioned. And so these were just a summer pilot, but was really helpful for a lot of businesses in maintaining a good economic flow throughout the summer. But one of the nice things, and I'm going to go back to the video, if I can. A lot of back and forth, sorry. But one of the really nice things that's coming in this area is, where's my mouse? Well, I've lost it. Anyways, we'll just carry on here. But you can see the street's a bit narrow. It's a one-way street. There's room for bikes to travel on both sides. But because it's a bit of a nightlife hub, you do have a lot of people traveling through here on foot, on bike, in cars, and a lot of businesses and residents are actually now pushing the city to make it an autovrij straat, which would be a car-free street. And that would help to bring more calmness and vibrancy to the area, but that is still an idea in progress, but maybe we'll have news to come in the years to follow. But now we're going to transition into a new space again, and I'll pass it on to Sophie.
Yeah, so we are going towards the next intersection, where it's again the intersection from Westblaak, so the big street that we were cycling on before. So we will go back there and pass it. And again, as you will see in a few seconds, we had to wait there. I think actually at that one we had to wait quite a while, which I think it's typical for Rotterdam. Sometimes when I bike through the city, I have to be somewhere, and if you have to pass the actual city center, you have to wait at a lot of red lights, and sometimes it's quite a long time, which can be annoying, but at least I say you are safe, because it's always a protected intersection. I think that's the main point. But
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that comes up a lot when we're talking about the design of intersections, is that idea of prioritized intersections or unsignalized and signalized. And you can understand as you're traveling through the city and have to stop, start, why people might be moving towards more of an unsignalized and having more of a priority landscape, which for the most part works quite well. They're predominantly much more safe. But this is where Rotterdam is now, and as we said, it's a work in progress, so things are changing as we as we go. But I think we're about to get started, and you can see one of the nice things is there's lots of space on both sides for pedestrians. So you can see someone over here, then there's us traveling along. But yeah, it's a nice, safe environment for people to get through, and it's often one of the areas that isn't as focused on in other cities is the intersections. So that seems to be where the priority is really placed here in terms of keeping people safe. And so we're coming up to our fourth stop on our trip through Rotterdam. And I'm going to pause it right here so you get a good view. So where we are now is the Nieuwe en Oude Binnenweg. And I'm going to just scroll over here. What you can see here, this street here is actually a project that we at Mobycon have been working on in terms of redesigning that space to be much more comfortable for all modes, make it a little more traffic calmed. In order to build up the vibrancy in the space. And a lot of the principles that were used in the proposed designs for the space were actually coming from the Good Street, which we presented a few weeks ago for you, which Leonard will present even more about for you next week. But it's basically transforming the space to be a lot more people-friendly, but still making sure that everyone is comfortable. And then on this side of the street, we connect back into that pedestrian mall that we were already sort of connected to back over at Black Station and at Markthal, which also connects to the Lijnbaan, which is the oldest pedestrian mall. It was the first, at least in Europe, if not the world, for a pedestrianized mall space. So it's nice that you have the option to connect with all of those on foot, which I have done many a times with my family. I'm sure Sophie's done it plenty of times. So just so you can get a sense of what the street looks like, at least from the Nieuwe Binnenweg, I'm going to switch back to the presentation. So this is a visualization of what that space will hopefully look like eventually. I think it's still a bit of a work in progress. But what you can see here is a shared fietsstraat on either side of the grass tramways, which are pretty iconic for most of Rotterdam, as we've passed a lot of them along the way. But you can also see really wide pedestrian areas, and that goes back to the city's commitment to make it much more walk-friendly for people throughout the city, regardless of age and ability.
Yes. So what you can see here is actually, I will show it to you when we go back to the video. It's the next intersection, but during the corona pandemic in March, April, those spots here, as you can see, and also Nieuwe Binnenweg, where Melissa just showed you right now, were closed off for car traffic. And they did this to allow more space for people, because obviously people went a lot more outside on walks and took their bike out, so they wanted to create a safer space for people to walk, but it was also to reduce a bit the noise, because people were now suddenly all day at home, had to work from there, and if it's quite a busy road it can be noisy. So they tried that out for a few months, and I think it worked really well. I will also show you this stop back in the video.
All right, I'll take us back there. All right.
Yes, so this part was also closed off for cars. What I really like about this stretch, so we are on the stretch going straight to the central station, but I really like it that here you have on the one side this water body, so it's quite nice and has lots of arts. You can take a nice walk, and on both sides you have those older buildings, I guess what you know more as the typical Dutch buildings. Because before we had more modern buildings, so I really like this street because it gives you a bit more of this typical Dutch feeling, but then you are still in Rotterdam, and if you go a few blocks further you are back with the modern buildings.
For our tram enthusiasts, this would be one of dozens of trams we will have passed along the way. And it's just a nice little juxtaposition, I think, when you've got the cycling and you've got a bit of pedestrianization, and obviously you've got cars, but then you've got these trams that basically take you throughout the city. But instead of it being ugly and asphalt, we've got lovely green, which really stands out.
I wanted to show you here what I just said. So we just passed all the old buildings, and then you are back here seeing this modern building. This one's called Calypso, and it's by the British architect William Alsop. I think, yeah, he did quite a few iconic buildings throughout the world, let's say.
And now we come to when you get to know that the Netherlands isn't perfect. We still have people parking in the bike lanes here. That's me shimmying through with the camera very, very slowly so as to not hit a car or the camera. But it just stands to that idea that Rotterdam is always a work in progress. Not everything is necessarily perfect, but it's very comfortable for the most part. And I think, Sophie and I would both attest that this stretch is maybe not our favorite, but it takes us to a very special place very soon.
Just gonna quickly stop it here. So this is the spot that I showed you before in the picture where it was closed off here and here for car traffic. So the cars could not turn and just use the street one way. But now, yeah, it's open again. And you can see there's always lots of traffic on that road as well. So, yeah.
Another thing to bring up at this point while we watch a woman eat a sandwich as she's crossing the street, maybe it's from the banh mi place just up the road that I've been to that is very tasty. But with a lot of that redevelopment in the city in the 60s, that really modernist design aesthetic, a lot of the buildings were built very tall with very little regard for the ground level. So you can see it here with the plinths, they're quite high. And what that actually did at the time was really take a lot of the life away from the city at the street level. And in the last 10 years or so, the city itself has really been working to revitalize that. They've come up with a few pilot programs, a few ways to really bring that space back. And you can see here there's some seating, we've built in some grass, and then further in here you can reach that pedestrianized area that I was mentioning earlier. But all in a way to sort of bring a bit of life back to the street level, even in the places that are a little more business focused. And once again, another person parked in the bike lane. I think, Sophie, you were going to talk a bit about what we're seeing here.
Well, yeah, as you can see, there are always, as you get closer to the central station, lots of bicycles parked around on the street. I think it's, we have this amazing underground parking spot at the central station, but yeah, people are sometimes a bit lazy and just want to park it on the street. I mean, I do it too, but yeah, it's quicker if you just park it outside. And yeah, here again, you can see we are back at the modern buildings, tall buildings. There's a lot of firms in here, and yeah.
And now we're almost at our final destination. Just cross over a little bit of tram tracks. One of the other things you can see, there's always lots of street art. So I highly recommend taking a ride through Rotterdam to see that if you're ever, or when you're finally over here. We'll take a pause here at the iconic Central Station. Yes. So if you look around here, we'll give you a little bit of bearings. So we're now facing to the north. I'm getting my own bearings. And so you've got the Central Station, you've got some of the older established buildings on this side, you've got the bike parking there, then we've also got trams, and then some more of the industry over here. And I will pass it on to Sophie to discuss a bit more, and I think I'm switching back to the presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is our last stop, the Central Station, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about the history. So we have some nice pictures that we found of what it looked like way back. This was in 1958. So as you can see, it looked completely different, the square in front of the station. It was way more car-centric, so you have more car lanes. There is way less space for pedestrians than you have right now. You can't really see any cycle tracks, so it was really, at the car time of the Netherlands. I'm also not quite sure what's going on with the strange circle design and the hole that you can see there, but yeah, I guess it's a good thing that they redesigned it. This is what it looks like right now. I really like this picture because you can see again that it is a multimodal transport hub. You can see here all the trams come in here, then here you have the access to the metro station, and as Melissa said, there you have the bicycle parking entrance. Then here you can't really see it, but on this side of the building there is a tunnel that leads you on the north side to the city. So you pass through all the train tracks. And yeah, as you can see, lots of space for pedestrians. You have the cycle tracks, and what we saw in the video is actually the street that leads up to the central station has a lot of different car lanes, but then as you enter the area just before the station, here, they narrow it down and you only have one car lane, which I think was really well done, because otherwise, yeah, it would be really hard for people to cross, and usually you have lots of streams of people that gather around there. The train station is also very good connected to, basically everywhere. From Rotterdam Central you can get to everywhere in the Netherlands pretty quick, but also for international travel you can go to Paris from the central station, Brussels, Cologne, and even to London. And since this year it's one way, so you don't have to stop in Brussels anymore. Mm-hmm. And the last thing is, I always like to tell the story about their building, the architecture of it. So it is like pointing towards the city center, because apparently people always had a hard time when they arrived at the central station, not really knowing, okay, where do I have to go, where is the city center? So the architect thought, let's just point people into the right direction with the building, and I think that's, a fun little fact to know on the side.
I think so too, and I learned something during this presentation because I did not know that. So I'm going to switch back to the video. We'll finish it off. We're basically at the end. You can just watch us cycle into the pedestrian area. But yeah, one of the things Sophie mentioned was that there's actually a bunch of modes meeting up here. So we know we have bikes coming here, obviously pedestrians. We've got people arriving by train, by tram, by metro, by bus, by taxi, and of course by car. So 8 different modes coming into one central hub station. But it doesn't look chaotic, which I think is a really, really great point about the way they redesigned that station. All right, so we've reached the end of the tour. We hope you enjoyed it. And we've got a few questions for you. We actually want to test how well you've been listening. So we'll see if these questions work, if they pop up on the screen. Come on. Of course. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to reset it.
All the technical problems that usually wouldn't happen if we could do the tour in real life.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right, we've already got some answers. Fantastic. So question number 1, which isn't showing up on the screen, but what is the mode share of Rotterdam? As I mentioned way back at the beginning of our presentation. What is happening in terms of our answers? We're getting some answers. I'm gonna, did that go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. Calculate. Question number 2, okay, we'll show the leaderboard at the end. Oh, come on, it is active. All the problems we can have, all in one webinar. Okay, question number 2. what year was the station? I'm just going to read them out and you guys can answer as we go along, and we'll go back to the presentation once we're there. So question number 2 was, what year was the station at Black buried? So I'm going to let you answer that. And actually, I'll give you the answer to question number 1 now that we're on question number 2. So for those of you that didn't know, or didn't happen to catch it, the mode share is just 25%. So about 1 in 4 bike trips are made by bike, 1 in 4 bike trips are made in Rotterdam. So less than most other cities, but still, I know, an enviable rate for a lot of North American cities and cities outside of the Netherlands that might be watching. Question number 2 was, what year was Black buried? And Sophie?
It was in 1993.
And why is that year significant, Sophie?
Because that's the year I was born. That's how I'll remember it.
Yeah. Okay, question number 3. Let's see if it'll populate. I think it's working. It's working for us, but it's not showing up when we go to the presentation. Question number 3 was, how long was the linear park?
Yeah.
So the linear park itself at Westblack will be 2 kilometers when completed, which will be a nice stretch of green throughout the city.
Yeah.
And then finally, is the leaderboard going to show up? No results yet. Oh, goodness. Well, we'll keep you on your honor as to how well you're all doing. And then question number 4, how many modes did we mention in terms of what leads into Rotterdam Central? And it is odd that they're not showing the ranking, because I thought I had set it up right. But anyways, if you were listening, we counted 8 total. 8 modes enter into Rotterdam Central. So that is a lot. But it makes it, a truly multimodal place to be. Okay, so we have now reached the point where we will do questions. So so if anyone wants to ask any questions, now you can. Scroll. And we will do our best to answer them. And remember to note the timestamps as we go. So we're just pulling up question number 1. I'm going to make that bigger so we can see it. Oh, now it's decided it wants to, there. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, so a question, curious how the investments in a pedestrian-focused infrastructure occur. Oh, there's several questions here. After the war, was there a national investment to rebuild, and what about since then?
Well, what I know about is those 7 new projects that I mentioned that were announced this summer from the city, which all focus on greening the city and giving more space to people. And that was actually in reaction also to the corona pandemic, because they said, okay, we now saw in this time again what people need, what do we want if something like this happens again, that we need more space for people so that you can keep your distance, and then if you have to stay at home and can only go for walks, that the city offers you kind of a lot of green spaces, and one of the problems that they also want to tackle in the coming years is to have better air quality, because I think Rotterdam struggles a little bit with that, but then also if it rains a lot, that you have better drainage. So that's why they, I think, now also want to focus more on greening the city.
And then in terms of the question post-war, yes, there was national investment. So the Netherlands did receive aid from a lot of countries, US included. And so a lot of that money was put towards rebuilding the city and revitalizing it. If you look back into the history, you can see that there were German and American architects that were hired to help with the redesign. And a lot of those were really focused on a more car-centric focus. Making way for the vehicle of the future, which we hear a lot when we're talking about redevelopment of the cities. Because of that blank slate, they could really experiment, really try new things. As you might have heard in a few previous presentations, there was public backlash in and around the 70s that pushed it in a different direction. And now, in terms of investment, a lot of that would come from the city, but there's also joint partnerships with the province and also with the national government in terms of funding for these projects. And I can't tell you exactly how those are allocated, but it's all, basically a big polder method of redesigning the city. But Rotterdam is one of those cities that's being very forward-thinking in terms of that reinvestment and redesign. Okay, we have some more questions. No, I don't want to skip. No, we're skipping ahead, sorry.
Maybe if you go out of the...
Yeah, I will just read you the questions. Or we will anyway. Marcus answered. There we go. So question number 2, does Rotterdam have any official policy on the books to remove a certain amount of parking spaces in the years to come, like Amsterdam? We're not certain.
I'm not sure.
I know that from speaking to some of our colleagues at the City of Rotterdam, they are looking at reducing parking in a lot more of the shopping areas or places where people travel a lot. So they're always experimenting with putting in, you might have seen the temporary bike parking that was put in some parking spaces. I think it was earlier last year and late the year before, or earlier this year and late the year before. They also do parking day demonstrations where they allow businesses to come and pay the meter on their dime to extend their shop, to extend their patios. I can't say exactly what the number is. They haven't been quite as boastful about what they're doing in terms of reducing parking, but we do know that there is a strategy in place to make the space much more green.
And I can imagine with all their other ideas that they have now, that they want to, they're taking away a lot of lanes for cars and only giving them one in each direction. And as we told you in the Witte de Witstraat, that a lot of shops actually want to have this car-free street, and I think then it goes quite hand in hand with also getting rid of some of the parking spots. So yeah, I assume that's something that they are thinking about.
Another question, were the bike treatments we saw on the video all based on standard Crow manual recommendations, or is there divergence? What do you think, Sophie? You deal a lot more with the Crow than I do.
Yeah, so I do think that they are mostly also based on that manual, because that's what is the basis of all the Dutch cycling infrastructure. But yeah, I wouldn't know to tell you for sure if they diverge from time to time, although I do assume that they do, because times are also changing, and especially Rotterdam, I think they are really, they always try kind of new things and are a bit more experimental. So yeah, I assume that they also sometimes diverge a bit from the standard.
Yeah,
it's after all a standard. So I think they wouldn't go lower, let's say, but then you can go a bit over top and change things up. So
yeah, but there's always the principles from the CROW that are always kept within there in terms of forgiveness and things like that. So there's always that guiding principle. But if you spend, just thinking about the way the cities are different from each other, there's always that idea that they're basically a guideline, and then the cities apply it in context based on the area that they're putting it in. So Rotterdam, given that it's a lot more car focused, will probably implement these a lot differently than, say, an Amsterdam or an Utrecht. Okay, and then one more question. What are the 3 most popular mode shares in Rotterdam? Sophie has the answer to this question.
Yeah, so it's on the first place we have cars with, I think it was 43%. And then you have the bike with 25, as we said. And then the third one is actually walking with 21%, which I think is really interesting because I think it's quite high. But yeah, Rotterdam is a great city, I think, to walk around, especially in the city center. It's a big city, but everything's still pretty close. You can really do it on foot. And yeah, I think actually you can get around sometimes a little bit easier in the city center on foot than by bike.
Definitely.
Yeah,
In non-corona
so,
times, it's definitely
yeah.
easier on foot. All right, well, those are the questions we have. If anyone has any further questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer what we can. We will do future digital study tours that might have a little more of a technical perspective, but we wanted to show you a little more of the history and the way that Rotterdam really changes over time and has changed and continues to change. It's really an adaptive city, and I think that's what both of us really like about it. As Sophie said in the promo, she was a little disappointed, but now has fallen in love with it.
Now it's my favorite Dutch city.
So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to just click back to the full presentation because we did have 2 more slides that you already got a sneak peek of. But the next webinar, as I might have hinted, where are we? Okay, anyways, forget it. The next webinar will be this time next week with Leonard Nout, and he'll be giving you the Good Street Part 2. So what Stephen and I presented 2 weeks ago in terms of the introduction to the Good Street, he will build upon and give you more technical knowledge about. So please do stay tuned for that and join us for that, hopefully. And then, yeah, finally, just thank you for everyone who is joining us. Thank you for subscribing to Mobycon Academy. Thank you, Sophie, for spending this time with me and cycling around Rotterdam with
pleasure.
me. And also, I always forget, but I want to thank our technical team who's behind the screens here. I don't take them for granted, although it's sometimes when I don't remind them that I appreciate them, I feel like I do. But none of this is possible without them. So thank you, guys. And until next time.